There has been a lot of talk about the upcoming open field infantry commander Bai Qi, and today I'm going to be showing you some early testing results from the Rise of Kingdoms tester that show how good Bai Qi can really be. So if you're interested in how good he might be on the field, if he might be a good investment, and some possible pairings from the Rise of Kingdoms tester, you want to stick around till the end of the video. Now, before we go into the testing results, I would like to quickly give a disclaimer and some information about how I ran the tests. Disclaimer, of course, this is a Rise of Kingdoms tester, it's not official, so I would obviously want to wait until in-game tests before you make a final decision if you invest in a commander or not, and their possible best pairings, but it does give us a gauge on whether or not they may be meta. For example, Belisarius Prime in the Rise of Kingdoms tester was pretty rubbish to be honest, and he turned out to be as such. So the tester is one of the better ways to get some early results, or probably the only way, but it's not fully accurate, so do keep that in mind. But I do find it interesting to look at these results, and it does give us some info on what the commander may do. Now, as for the testing parameters, I ran every single test a total of 10 times. I took a picture of at least 5 for most. I think I took a picture of 6 tests for some of them. Generally, the results were pretty similar between each report. You can see here the 10 reports of Zhulang Herman versus William Wallace Bai Qi, pretty much on point with the exact same results. As for equipment, I tried to run what sets I think were best for the troop type. For infantry, I ran the set you can see on the right. For archers, I ran the set you can see on the left. And cavalry, I ran their respective set as well. In terms of civilization, infantry were Vikings, cavalry were Byzantium, archers were Ottoman. I gave each side a 15% health bonus to mimic having a city skin. So you have a 5% health city skin, and also to have a 10% health rune. I gave each side VIP level 13 to 16. We are trying to do some lower spender free-to-play tests here. I set it to Season of Conquest because most fights are going to be done during KVK. And other than that, that was the majority of the testing parameters. For most archer things, I did run a full skill tree talent. And then for the infantry, I ran the full smite tree, talent tree. And then for cavalry, again, probably the full skill tree when I was running the tests that I did run. With all that out of the way, though, let's get into the results. So now here's the first test I ran. I thought we'll just start off by looking at if archers can beat the new troops. And real simply, Zhulang with Herman stood no chance against a Bai Qi Liu Che. I ran Bai Qi as the primary for these first 5 tests. The first test, Liu Che or Zhulang Herman lost by 20,000 7 wounds. The second test, they lost by 17,000. The third, they lost by another 20,000. They then lost by, I think this is 15,000. Then they lost by 22,000. Not a single report here was even close for Zhulang and Herman winning. There were some slightly better reports, but generally they lost on average around by 20 or like 17,000 to 18,000 7-win loss. It's a ridiculous loss. Bai Qi Liu Che absolutely ripped apart Zhulang Herman. I think that means archers are either not very meta or Bai Qi is overpowered. And obviously this is weird because you would expect Bai Qi to lose to archers, except he didn't, and archers got absolutely decimated. So Zhulang Herman definitely is not a meta pairing against Bai Qi Liu Che. The March absolutely just demolished it. In terms of running the other way round, would I run Liu Che primary, Bai Qi secondary? Generally, we're going to say a no here. So you can see first support, it's similar, winning by around, it's actually worse. You only win by around 10,000 7 wounds, around 12,000, around another, this is a 16,000 report, a 7,000 win, a 12,000 win, and also again a 9,000 win. So really, this report and running Liu Che as a primary doesn't make sense. Bai Qi seems to be a stronger primary, whether it be because he has the smite talent tree or his skills, in my opinion, the way they work and the stacks that he is gaining, that I'm forgetting the name of right now, the stacks that he gains, pretty much it gives him a better advantage if he's a primary commander. So I think Liu Che, fine as a secondary, there's no need to run him as the primary, and you would just run a Bai Qi as a primary for most reports. I then ran a Liu Che Bai Qi Bai Qi as a secondary again. This time we're against the Ragnar Scipio, winning by 16,000 7 wounds, winning by around 18,000, winning by 17,000, and also winning by, I think this is 19,000, and finally winning by a 15,000 win. Now, if I ran Bai Qi as a primary, I would expect this to be even better because we can see here from the initial reports, Bai Qi primary is stronger, but I did keep him as the secondary for these reports at least. So from that point onwards, after the Zhulang Herman reports, I kept him as a secondary just for the testing. We can see that he completely demolished the March, so it's just going to be absolutely meta dominant. in my opinion, against pretty much most marches. The only time where we saw a bit of a difference was when we ran the march into a Hao Che Bing Arthur. Arthur and Hao Che Bing, while they're not winning most of the reports, they did win some. First report, they lost by 6,000. Second report, they lost by 9. The third report, though, they did win by around 3,007 wounds. Obviously not a huge win, but the fact that cavalry are beating infantry was really interesting. Fourth report, they won by a 4,000 win. Fifth report, they lost by 7,000. And the sixth report, I think this is one where I did 6, they won by 5,000. So you can see it's kind of back and forth here with Bai Qi and Liu Che against Hao Che Bing with Arthur. And I did run this again later on with Bai Qi as a primary, but we will get to that soon. I then decided to test Bai Qi Philip, which I predicted would be a nice pairing. It got demolished by Hao Che Bing Arthur, losing by 18,007 wounds, losing by 18,000 again, losing by, I think this is 18,000 again, losing by around 11,000, and losing by 17,000. I did run the report 10 times. It says 8, but I let it run more. I just took a picture of the first 5. Philip, I mean, I think he's gonna be alright with Bai Qi, but in terms of a 1v1 situation, it's definitely not meta. Now, when you come to open field fighting and you're getting the AoE damage off Bai Qi and the buffs from Philip, it can still be a relatively good march. I think that these reports don't fully reflect how he could perform on the open field. Now, he's obviously losing, don't get me wrong, and it would be better if he was winning, and I think there are a few pairings with Philip where he does win in a 1v1 situation, but it just wasn't these reports. So I think that generally, we're going to be looking at not running a Philip with Bai Qi for most situations, but it's not a miserable thing, and I think it could still work on the field if you wanted to build a bit of a niche murder ball. Moving on to the next report I ran, I tried a William Wallace primary because I thought that march would also do pretty good, and it did do alright. First report, they won by 1,000. Second report, they won by 13,000, which I think is the biggest win against Hao Che Bing Arthur. Third report here, won by 4,000. Fourth report, won by 9,000. And fifth report, won by around 4,000. Of all the reports I ran with William Wallace against Hao Che Bing Arthur, it didn't lose once. So that kind of means it might be a bit of a better or more consistent pair than a Liu Che or Bai Qi with Liu Che. When it comes down to William Wallace versus Bai Qi Liu Che itself, William Wallace actually won a few of these, and Bai Qi Liu Che won some as well. So William Wallace winning by around 3,000, but then losing by 2, winning by 8, losing by 3, losing by 3 again. So, and also winning again by 2, and that was all I ran. So the march, kind of back and forth there. I think it's better again to run the Bai Qi Liu Che just for the fact that you get double AoE on the field, and that's going to be stronger, but it wasn't absolutely miserable by any means, and I think it is still a proper march you could run, especially if you want to stick with the Liu Che Alex and split with William Wallace, but we'll talk about that in a minute. William Wallace Bai Qi against Zhulang Herman though, winning by around 14,000, winning by 17, winning by 12, winning by, I think this is 18, and then winning by around 13,000, and finally winning by almost 20,000 here. Now, not as good as the Bai Qi primary, Liu Che secondary, reason probably being the double AoE was better, and Bai Qi in that situation against Zhulang Herman just performed better. Now, why that's the case, couldn't 100% tell you, but it seems like William Wallace, decent pairing, just not going to be the most overpowered with Bai Qi. As for the last reports I ran, it was Bai Qi Liu Che against Hao Che Bing with Arthur. Bai Qi Liu Che won every single one of these reports. I think it's simple to say Bai Qi is better as a primary commander because he won these by around 10,007 wins each. First report winning by 7, second report winning by 13, third report winning by 10, fourth report winning by 13, and the final report winning by 10,700 wins or 10,000 again. So Bai Qi Liu Che seems like Bai Qi is a bit more of a primary. So what does this mean in terms of Bai Qi's pairings and his open field potential? Well, I think the tests show it's a ridiculously good march. I mean, it destroyed absolutely everything. Pretty much no march stood a chance. I would have liked to test a Nevsky or an Arthur Pendragon primary with a more smite-driven march, but I couldn't test that because I don't know how to set it up on the tester, if it's even on the tester. So possibly Arthur Pendragon with the correct armaments could be better than Bai Qi, but generally he seemed to be really good. Best pairing, easily Liu Che. Possible to pair him with William Wallace if you want to stick with Liu Che Alex or something like that. I think William Wallace might see a bit of a resurgence in the top 2 or 3 infantry marches when you want to split up your smite marches, because it's still very good and it did perform quite well. Obviously, though, the double AoE on the open field that Bai Qi with Liu Che will have is going to be much better than William Wallace's single target for the most part. So the AoE on Liu Chen Bai Qi, when you put them together, is insane, and Bai Qi as a primary tends to perform way better than Bai Qi as a secondary, and William Wallace generally want to run him as a primary, so it doesn't make a lot of sense to run the march in most situations. But if you still want to run it, it can still make sense. And I think it was relatively good. In terms of best trading, definitely Bai Qi primary, Liu Che secondary. The other thing to note, Philip not as overpowered as people may have thought, at least some initial tests. He could be better in game once you get into real open field situations. We're looking at 5 March murder balls, his buffs are fully usable. He's also quite a strong commander in terms of the fact that he's going to be making your other marches very strong. In those situations, you could certainly see him being a much stronger commander and trading a lot better if you have your murder ball built around it. So Philip II wouldn't completely neglect him, but he does seem to be a relatively strong commander. Overall, I don't think there's a single march shown that could even stop Bai Qi Liu Che. It was just that overpowered. Not even Arthur Pendragon was able to come close unless you run Liu Che as a primary, which obviously you just wouldn't do from those tests. In terms of archers aren't even close to countering. I didn't test most of the archer pairings, like Boudica is not even close to meta, and Shajar Ashurbanipal would probably just get demolished in a 1v1 because Shajar just doesn't have a very good pairing for most 1v1 battles. So I just didn't bother. They're just not going to be able to beat the infantry march. It's simple as that. And Bai Qi seems like he's going to be close to, if not absolute meta on the open field. I think we'd want to wait until in-game testing to see how his mechanics fully work, but he does seem to be a ridiculously overpowered commander. Now, if you enjoyed today's video and found it interesting and you want to see more results or more information on Bai Qi once he's fully in the game, I highly recommend subscribing to the channel. Small thing, really helps me, and it is much appreciated. Other than that, I just want to say thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.